Hello and welcome to episode 24 of the Nostalgia Bubble podcast, the show where two lifelong best friends celebrate the movies that they love. I'm your host Shuggy, an amateur film reviewer and nerd.
And I am Nye, the Chucky to Shug's Will.
So I'm the underachieving genius and you're the useless layabout who just wants me to get on with my life secretly.
Which he does end up inspiring Will to do.
Honestly, one of my favourite bits of Ben Affleck's entire career as an actor.
I cannot disagree, actually. I've got to say, until seeing this, I probably wasn't the biggest fan of Ben Affleck. I found him a little sort of monotonous. But yeah, absolutely brilliant. And I'm sure we will get into that.
Yeah, and if you couldn't tell from all of that, we're talking about Good Will Hunting today.
Yes, we are. It was my pick. It was my last pick for the season.
Yeah, it was a good pick.
I can't believe that the season has come so quickly to almost a close. I wanted to pick one of my favourite films, as it was my last pick. And this was, I could watch this again and again. This is one that I hadn't seen for a while. Actually, I think I saw it last year, so during the first lockdown in the UK. I just wanted to watch it again and thought, go with what is, I think, fairly regularly considered a bit of a classic to some extent.
Yeah, I'll get into more later, but maybe not quite as classic as when it came out. Still well received, but I think its appreciation has grown over time.
Yeah, I think so.
I'd heard great things about this film for ages. I only saw it for the first time maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, me too, actually.
Maybe late uni. And I mean, we mentioned it up top. Actually, the scene that really stuck with me was that kind of Ben Affleck scene where he talks to him, and then obviously you go into the incredibly emotional kind of finale with Will and Sean, and Robin Williams and Matt Damon are just outstanding throughout the film. And that last half hour just blew me away.
Oh yeah, I mean, to be honest, like the thing that I think watching it and being able to kind of and analysing it a little more this time, I realised how many mic drop speeches there are in this. I mean, the writing is just so good, and it's just like one monologue after the other, and every single time I was like, my emotions were brought back to the surface. And from the first one in the bar to Robin Williams's to Sean's one next to the lake or the pond, to Ben Affleck, like it was just absolutely gobsmacking time and time again, just one monologue after the next, and it is just that they don't get boring in any sort of way.
It's very fitting you mention the writing as a great kind of segue to the pre-production, because where we have to start talking about this film is with the script.
Go for it.
So this kind of originated as Matt Damon's kind of final assignment for one of his a playwriting class he was doing at Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
So he was meant to write a play, and he ended up writing a 40-page script, which was like the first scene of a film, the first act of a film.
Right.
And apparently, he went to see his professor, and he told him, "I might have failed the class, but I've got something that's like the first act of something even longer." And apparently, the professor actually, whilst it wasn't quite the brief, said that the script was something really very authentic and very real. And kind of you get the indication from other classmates who were working with Damon that the idea had kind of been in and around his head for a bit longer. Going back, he had done a directing class where they had to perform an original scene, and his was kind of set in this. It was something resembling the kind of therapy scene that we get to later on.
Yeah,
and it makes sense that these therapy scenes ideas kind of are what survived, because Damon has said that the kind of first therapy scene where you've got this kid outsmarting these therapists and kind of putting them in their place, that's the one bit that kind of survived in its entirety through to the final draft.
Right. Okay.
So after he does this class, he gets on his best friend to come help him out, a certain Mr. Ben Affleck, to help
Mhm.
finish it. So eventually they finish it up in the mid-90s, and they sell the script to Castle Rock Entertainment. I'll get into them in a sec. Weirdly, this script that they sold was originally a thriller rather than the kind of drama it turned into. And
Oh wow.
yeah, it sounds like quite different. And I think the kind of like one through line is this kind of therapy stuff.
Mm.
But so Castle Rock Entertainment, they were owned by Rob Reiner, the director of another film that you picked this season, Stand By Me.
Yes.
And he was the president and director of one of my all-time favourite films, Princess Bride, which becomes relevant in a minute. So the deal that sold the script to Castle Rock included a clause that meant Damon and Affleck would earn an extra $100,000 if they were the only credited screenwriters on it. Now, there is a bit of controversy around this script and like who really wrote it, and I think this hasn't helped that controversy. Is that because of this clause, everyone assumes that another screenwriter has kind of been left off. So Rob Reiner, he kind of told them to drop the thriller elements and focus on the relationship between Will and the therapist, and he brought on his friend William Goldman to kind of read the script and give some notes. William Goldman is the man who wrote the book The Princess Bride, wrote the screenplay for The Princess Bride, and has wrote other films that he did with Rob Reiner. So they're friends. Makes sense that they'd bring him on board.
Yeah.
And there are lots of rumours that Goldman completely rewrote this script. Rumours that William Goldman has denied, apart from in one kind of joking scene in a book, like page in a book. He has denied them himself, and all he said he did was agree with Reiner's kind of assertion to drop the thriller element.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So how true any of this is, I don't know. But the credited writers on the film are Damon and Affleck.
And they got an extra $100,000 for it.
And an Academy Award. So it was a good day
And
all
an
round.
Academy Award, yeah. It was phenomenal. I think what this really brilliantly demonstrates as well, actually, is how smart Matt Damon is. Being able to, obviously being able to write and like that is just kind of incredible. Obviously assuming it was him that wrote it. But I think and like it becomes quite clear how smart and how bright he is as a person.
Yeah.
And I think that is the general consensus. There's a reason why his cameo in Team America is made to look so stupid.
That reason is because the puppet turned up and looked incredibly stupid.
Oh, is that exactly why?
Yeah. Essentially, it was meant to be a more conventional, just Matt Damon, and the puppet turned up and just looked like a moron.
That's brilliant. That makes it even better.
Yeah.
And I think that's really fitting because he is clearly such a bright person. Like, you can tell he's a smart guy.
Yeah.
And I think that that's just reflected in this script so well. And in the acting as well. It takes real intelligence to be able to put on a performance the way he did in this film.
Again, you're nailing these cameos because talking about the acting, obviously Damon and Affleck, they wanted to star in this film. Both of them had done some kind of smaller performances. I know Affleck had been in Dazed and Confused, stuff like that. But they weren't big names, and the studio wanted Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio to star in this film.
How could I can completely see them in the film, but I just can't see it being any different to how it turned out, because for me this film is just, I wouldn't change a thing about it personally.
Yeah, and obviously I think that might have been kind of a deal breaker between both parties. Neither side kind of wanted to budge down, and eventually Castle Rock decided they weren't going to make it, and the pair had to find another studio to buy it. But now kind of all the studios that originally had kind of had a bidding war were turning them down, probably due to this acting issue. So at the time, both of them were filming Kevin Smith's Chasing Amy. Affleck had also been in some other Kevin Smith films like Mallrats. They have a ongoing relationship. In a later Kevin Smith film, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, Ben Affleck not only plays a character, but him and Matt Damon and Gus Van Sant all cameo as themselves, filming a sequel to Good Will Hunting, which
Brilliant.
is a really funny scene if you haven't seen it. And he agreed to pass the script on to Harvey Weinstein at Miramax, who agreed to buy it. Like, Miramax were like, yeah, we love it, we'll take this on. One of the things that Damon and Affleck did was insert a fake pornographic scene between Will and Sean into the script to really test which executives actually read it.
Great.
So if they got
Smart.
asked, if they got asked about this, they'd know the executive has actually taken time to read this script.
Yeah. Okay.
So initially, Affleck asked Kevin Smith to direct this. His response was that they needed a good director, and I think this is Kevin Smith in a very kind of Kevin Smith and humble way, saying he's not the right fit more than he's a bad director. And they later chose Gus Van Sant, who I believe Affleck had worked with before. And then the film got a big boost in credibility and bankability when Matt Damon was cast as the lead in Francis Ford Coppola's The Rainmaker. And that was probably a big kind of part of what convinced Robin Williams to come on board. Suddenly Matt Damon's a bigger star, suddenly he's a name, and this film has more chance of being a success. And that's kind of what I've got on the pre-production. So let's get into this brilliant film.
Yes.
I do. I remember turning this on and then thinking, oh wait, we've kind of seen the parody of this opening in the opening scene of Rushmore, where
Yes.
this is my first thought, is when Max goes up to solve an equation, and then in Rushmore he's terrible, has no idea what he's doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw this as well. When I watched it, that immediately jumped straight into my head.
I mean, what makes it even better is that kind of the idea where this came from for Matt Damon is that his brother Kyle was visiting a physicist at MIT, saw some of these blackboards in this hall, and just wrote a made-up, elaborate equation on it. And it just ended up staying up there for months. So this kind of whole not knowing the equation and just having something ridiculous just fits with the actual reality of something that happened even more. It just makes that Rushmore moment even better.
Fantastic. I mean, straight from the get-go, there are some really interesting relationships that are built and kind of depicted. I think, one of the first times that you kind of get to see Will in his element is in the bar. Obviously you see him working out the equations and stuff, but this is how this is the first time you sort of see him interact with the world around him. And I absolutely love this scene. It is possibly one of my favourite scenes in the film.
Okay.
But I think that's more just for kind of an entertainment element, like entertainment perspective. I think this is like immediately you're kind of set up with this really kind of charming dynamic between Will and Chucky, and the fact that the way that kind of develops through the film, I think is just really beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this whole kind of opening sequence of, you're cutting between Lambo and his stuff in MIT, and the reunion where it's kind of this very upper class, it's very kind of privileged, and you're cutting back to Will and hanging out with his mates, these working class poor guys from Boston. I think the whole thing is doing just an incredible job of showing the differences between these two, and this scene you mentioned about them hanging out in the bar, and they know everyone, they're feeling comfortable, they're shouting at their mates down the other side of the bar, and it's completely different from when they go into the college bar later on. So it's not only just setting up kind of differences between these two worlds, and probably a commentary. These guys, Affleck and Damon, they grew up in Boston. They're probably talking about something very real in terms of in Boston. if you're these working class people in the inner city, and then just down the road in Cambridge you have Massachusetts Institute of Technology, one of the, as they say later on in the film, kind of one of the foremost technical universities in the world, and this kind of huge disparity between the two. So they're probably commenting on very real things, and I think this whole sequence is doing an incredible job of setting all that up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that contrast is really nicely highlighted all the way through. I think that, that obviously comes back as a huge kind of plot point as well. Just, we were talking a few weeks ago about the setups in Inglourious Bastards, and I think that this is something that this film does as well. It's just kind of something that fantastic writing can do, is just set up relationships, dynamics and storylines incredibly well, and that's exactly what we get here.
So for me, I was kind of watching it, I was thinking, this kind of very quick editing and jumping between these scenes, it's something that I can personally find very jarring in films. Take the last Star Wars film, I really hate the opening of that. I think everything jumps so quickly. But in this, it's serving a purpose. You're quickly cutting from, them hanging out in a bar, drinking beers, being rowdy, to quick cut to this, reunion, and you've got barbershop quartet singing into the camera, and you go, these people could not be from more different worlds. And as you say, it perfectly sets up kind of what comes later. Obviously, Will, this working class guy, Lambo, this professor who is just only cares about kind of the science and the maths and driving that forward, and doesn't understand Will at all because of where he's from. And then the one who bridges that gap is Sean. He's the one who understands both worlds, and he helps Will understand both worlds.
And oh my god, is Robin Williams good in this film? For me, he just, every single time I watch this, it breaks my heart. Obviously, we know the reality of, Robin Williams killing himself, and there was kind of such a kind of exploration of mental health in this film, that now retrospectively, obviously watching it now, you kind of it hits home harder, but he just seems to handle it with such kind of sensitivity, and he's gentle. The character is just so kind of, and not all the time, but he's so understanding and open and caring, and that kind of contrast with Lambo. I mean, obviously that's something that's a huge element of this film as well, but the way that there's sort of this triangle between Lambo, Sean and Will, and as you said, Sean sort of bridges the gap there, is just so kind of monumental in the story here, and in Will's arc obviously, and of course in Sean's arc, and Lambo's as well. You see at the end he accepts that he was wrong and didn't understand.
And I love that kind of, that final confrontation scene between Lambo and Sean, where Lambo's, oh, you're jealous of everything I've achieved, you're jealous of the Fields Medal I've got, and Sean's just like, no, you think that I'm a failure. I don't think I'm a failure. I love what I have done in my life. I think I've been doing really good things. Just because I haven't had the noteworthy success, been lauded by my peers as you have been, doesn't mean that I failed. And I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you kind of see that outlook and that ethos reflected in the way that Sean relates to Will, 100%. and the way that Sean talks about one monologue that stood out in respect to this is when he talks about the little things with his wife, and how he found the little pleasures, and he found happiness in the kind of most seemingly odd or normal things, and by the end of it, you kind of realise that he relates that to everyday life as well.
Yeah. I gotta say, mentioning that sequence and the kind of the starting point where he's talking about his wife farting in bed, and
Yeah,
you've got this massive Matt Damon suddenly bursting out laughing.
yeah, yeah.
That is because that stuff was ad-libbed by Robin Williams
Oh, really?
on set that day, and that is Matt Damon's legitimate reaction.
I love that so much.
I mean,
That
the
is
guy's
just
a
such
genius.
a nice bit of. Oh yeah, I mean, this for me is just such a spectacular performance, and it takes and I think what I mean about he approaches it so kind of sensitively is that he's smart. He knows what he's doing with the role and with the material, and he has what he's ultimately done is he's just brought this incredible performance to the table that just feels like it feels like it's respectful. I think it would be so easy for somebody to for an actor who's in a position where they are portraying somebody who works so closely with people who struggle with mental health issues and personal issues, it would be so easy to rely on stereotypes, and because it is such a sensitive issue, but he doesn't do that here. And the fact that he can still bring out those moments of humor as well, and make it so great that it's worth keeping in the film.
Yeah.
That he is, hands down, he's a genius. And if you've seen him in Flubber and you've seen him in Mrs. Doubtfire, and then you see him in this, and you see him in Dead Poets Society, it is just the range that he has as an actor.
Yeah, 100%. This is what I was going to say is, you get the kind of conventional Robin Williams performance, good morning, Vietnam. It's big, it's over the top. Aladdin, he kind of changed the game in voice acting because everyone wanted to replicate Robin Williams. It's this fast talking, it's this huge energy, it's this over the top physical comedy, throwing out impressions every now and again. And this is so much more reserved, as you say. It's this wonderful, kind. When he needs to be, it's forceful. It's such a genuine human kind of performance. And I do like that he got his one little scene where he got to go full Robin Williams, where he's kind of talking about the first time he met his wife, or the moment he knew that his wife was the one.
Yeah,
and he's talking about the baseball, the sixth game of the World Series, and he's getting to do all the physical Robin Williams being energetic, doing impressions of the stadium announcer, and all of this.
Yeah.
So he gets that.
But oh my god, when he brings that back and goes, "I didn't go."
Yeah.
You're like. That for me, that just hit me so hard. I was like, "Oh my god, this performance is unbelievable!" That you see, as you said, you see this kind of traditional Robin Williams that everybody knows and loves, and then out of nowhere, just pulls it back, takes it back to that place that he's been in for the rest of the film, and you're just like, wow.
Yeah, I was just going to say the exact same thing. When you get Matt Damon. This is the first time he's really got this big emotion out of Damon's character, I think, and he's got him really excited talking about this. Did you rush the field? He's like, I wasn't there. I was having a drink with my future wife in a bar, and then obviously the line that he kind of steals at the end, where Matt Damon's asking about his friends, and he's like, I looked them in the eye and I said, "Sorry, boys, I got to go see about a girl." And then brings it back at the end and the way Matt Damon brings back at the end is great.
Tears every time.
Yeah, it's so good.
What I love about Sean as a character as well is that you mentioned that he's kind of forceful when he needs to be, and he loses his temper as well. But what I absolutely adore about this character is that no matter what he does, or how he feels, or how he responds to anything that Will does, or even Lambo to an extent, there is always a lesson. He's always teaching. He's always doing something to help somebody else. So even when he gets Will up by the throat, against a wall by the throat, you know, he uses that later. You know, like he then kind of, he obviously kind of gets control, and he says Thursday at 2 o'clock or whatever.
Yeah.
And then he sits him down by the lake, and he uses his experience of aggression and violence and his outburst to teach Will and to help Will. And that is something that is just so beautiful about this character, and about how the character is written, and about how it's portrayed, is that no matter how angry or upset Sean is feeling, he uses that to help somebody else.
I also love the fact that, you know, he is a flawed person. He's giving kind of Will these lessons of, you know, Will obviously will get more into kind of the trauma that Will has gone through, and you know, him being shut down. But you know, obviously his whole kind of journey in this film is getting Will to come out of that shell and actually open up. And Will kind of pushes back on him and says, "Well, you haven't done that since your wife died." And he kind of has to realise that, yeah, Will's right about me as well. And you know, come the end of the film, he's going to go travelling. He's going to go see some of the world. He agrees to go to one of his kind of college reunions that he's been avoiding because he kind of doesn't get on with any of the people there. He also has been going, you know, repressing himself from the world and not opening up because of the death of his wife. And it's through Will that he is able to grow as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, there is such a strong arc for him, and you see that he realises that and appreciates that as he goes through the film as well. So you understand that, you know, he wouldn't be where he was at the end without Will, and you see that he understands that too, you know, and that moment where they kind of say goodbye to each other, and you know, you see that he really recognises that it was Will that helped him, and also, you know, some of the best characters that you will ever see, and some of the best performances you will ever see, are the performances where you can recognise that they are not perfect, and you see something that you can relate to. You know, being angry about being angry at some irritating little kid that just knows how to get into your head, and losing your rag with them is probably a tendency or an urge that a lot of people have.
Oh yeah.
You know, so it's and seeing those violent outbursts and seeing it come from a place of real passion, and just like understanding that he doesn't. This character isn't perfect. Doesn't have to be perfect, and doesn't have to try to be perfect. Is, you know, partially to do with the writing, and partially to do with the character, and the acting, and you know, that's something that Robin Williams puts into it so well.
But I will say also, I do want to give credit to the writing on this, because there must be, you know, such a tendency to write this kind of mentor figure as kind of infallible. You know, you go back to kind of classic fantasy, and you've got, you know, someone like Gandalf kind of written as this kind of all-knowing, all-wise, when he's there, everything's all right. And kind of the same about Dumbledore until you actually read into it any bit, and he's the worst teacher you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
But kind of this attitude that definitely these kind of like wise figures who are teaching you your path, that they are going to be kind of infallible. And so for you know, young writers like Damon Affleck to put in kind of these flaws, you know, put in this growth into the character, and you know, it just instead of make him far more round, because no one is infallible. No one, everyone has flaws,
Yeah, of course.
and that's what the lesson that he is teaching Will at one point. You know, that whole kind of speech about these, you know, the farting stuff is, yeah, no one is a perfect person, and it's those flaws that make us so complete. And you know, when you open yourself up to someone and they embrace your flaws. That's what like kind of real love is. And I think, you know, that's exactly how the attitude the writing has taken, and as you say, Williams' performance as well. They've opened this character up and, like, you know, let his flaws be on show. Same with Will, and that's what makes them such incredible characters that we can fall in love with.
Well, that's why I think this is such an amazing film through and through, is because there's not one character in this film that isn't flawed. And actually, it's the exploration of every single one of these characters' flaws that make this film what it is. You know, and I love that there is, with every character here, you know, they've so obviously got positives to them. You know, they've got strengths and they've got abilities and they've got, you know, I mean, Chucky is a great friend. He would be with Will through thick and thin, no matter what. You've got Lambo. Ouch.
I'm joking. I'm joking. You are the Chucky to my Will.
I told you. You've got Lambo, who is this, you know, incredibly successful, high-achieving, smart scholar, pretty much. He's this incredibly successful professor. You've got Sean, who I think is just... I think he's just perfect through and through. But and then you've got Will, who is probably one of the smartest people anyone in this film has ever met. But actually, what you explore is the flaws. It's almost like their positives are just a condition of the film. And actually, this film is about everything that is kind of, or that could be most commonly characterized as wrong about these people. You know, You don't look at all of those qualities in the same way that you look at how they get things wrong. And that's what makes this such a brilliant film, because it means that, you know, the audience don't just relate to the people, they relate to the film, they relate to the environment that is created, because you will never walk down the street and walk past somebody who isn't flawed, you know. And so they can see this kind of theory applied to basically a real world setting. And that's just what makes this such a fantastic film from beginning to end for me.
Yeah, and phenomenal writing from such young, inexperienced writers. It's superb. We haven't really talked about Will, and as he is the title character, I think we should dive kind of more into him.
Yes, let's.
You mentioned like how smart he is, and that kind of being this great positive. I also just love when he is kind of hanging out with his friends. I love his dynamic with Chucky and the other guys. And I actually really love his relationship with Skylar as well. I think every kind of date that they go on and whenever they're just hanging out and talking, they are so charming together. Obviously, his chemistry with Ben Affleck is going to be amazing. They're, you know, best mates since they were young. But he has great chemistry with Minnie Driver as well. I think those two play off each other so well and are just able to kind of joke around and be a bit silly in a way that he isn't with anyone else. I love that aspect of Will. That's kind of what really makes Will such an endearing character for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, his brains, they are something that he doesn't place, or he refuses to place importance in or recognise. And while obviously throughout the film you kind of see him learn that can get in places and he starts to value it more, it means that he actually puts his energy into his relationships with people. And so, yes, when you see him kind of on his own and he's, you know, practicing the maths on his bathroom mirror, you know, that's one kind of brief aspect of him. But then you start to see more of him kind of independently of his smarts. And so you see something in him that you don't see otherwise in the film, or that you wouldn't. And again, I think that kind of goes back to, you know, the flaws that you get to see. You know, if all of it was focused on his strengths, then you wouldn't necessarily see those relationships, because his relationships are part of his flaws. You know, the relationships that he builds or struggles to build. That's kind of where
That's the
he falls short.
central part of the film.
Exactly. And so, yeah, there's a really nice contrast between those moments where you see him completing these really hard equations on the board, or, you know, even the way you see him sort of completely put long-standing professors to shame. There's a really beautiful contrast between that and the way that he is just another kid off the block with his mates.
What I really love is when we mentioned kind of this central flaw that he's working on is the fact he's not able to fully put himself into these relationships because he's very closed off. Obviously, you spend the first kind of section of this film thinking, oh, it's all about kind of him being a maths genius and solving these maths puzzles and stuff. And it's when we meet Sean, and the first scene of Sean Maguire is him teaching a community college class in, I assume, in kind of psychotherapy or something along those lines, psychology.
Yeah.
And he's talking to them about trust and why trust is so important in these relationships and building trust. And I love that because it's something I've only seen this film once before, and I wouldn't have noticed it then because I didn't know the rest of the film. But watching it this time and knowing what the film goes on to be, that's entirely what the film is him not only building trust with Will, but getting Will to build trust with everyone else, to be able to open up to his friends like Chucky, and have Chucky come back and open up about what his desires are, to be able to open up to Skylar, which he really struggles to do throughout the film. Obviously he starts off lying about having 12 brothers. Some of them are living with him and all of this, and then when she's confronting him and saying, I love you, come to California with me, and him being completely unable to do it because he's afraid that if they go there, she'll find something in him that she doesn't like, until he's able to build that trust with people, which obviously comes from these kind of very deep-rooted issues he has around his abuse as a child from his kind of foster parents. Until he's able to kind of work past those issues, he's never going to be able to build trust. And I love that is introduced with Sean. And it's one of those kind of brilliant scenes where it's like, if there's ever a classroom scene in a film, pay attention to what they're talking about in the class, because it is certain to be relevant to the themes of the film. I mentioned it back in Hereditary. Yeah, it's a classic trope, and I highly recommend if you're watching a film and there's suddenly a class on something, pay attention to what it's about.
Apart from Indiana Jones.
Okay, no, well, it depends on if it's obviously done for comedy or something like that. But if they're discussing some kind of
course,
thematic thing, philosophical thing, anything like that, pay attention because it is important to the themes of the film.
Yeah, and indeed it is, and I think that scene with Skylar when she asks him to go with her is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and him breaking down and being like, you don't want to know about the fact that I'm an orphan and the fact that I was abused, and her being like, yes, I do, because she cares for him, that she does want to know that, just because. And it's as simple as that. If the people that you love are hurting in some way, you want to know.
Yeah, of course, and I think that's something that Will becomes more and more familiar with as he goes through the film. As Sean opens up to him, he starts. I think it's almost like a two-way street, isn't it? Like he will kind of start to care more about people as they open up to him. You see that with Sean, you see that with Skylar. I think you even kind of, to an extent, see that with Chucky as well. The value that he places in those people and their opinion and who they are to him increases tenfold when they start to open up to him. And so you sort of see him almost unintentionally or go through that journey himself. And yeah, I mean, for me, I thought Minnie Driver in this was brilliant. I thought this was the first time that you got to see her kind of step up and meet Matt Damon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Matt Damon is obviously fantastic in this. I think that Ben Affleck is surprisingly brilliant in this. And obviously, as well as Robin Williams. And, I think Stellan Skarsgård is good as well.
Yeah.
Really good as well. But I think Minnie Driver has the kind of, I would say the least to do up until this point, but she certainly has the most kind of placid character. And then obviously this scene is kind of an explosion, and you're like, and in terms of acting, this is for me where you're kind of really introduced to Minnie Driver in this film and what she can do. And she meets him, she steps up, and she's with him.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, for kind of the first few scenes that she's in with her and Will, it's kind of about their chemistry and like how well they play off each other and how kind of cute their interactions are and how charming they are as a couple. And this is the one time where you get like, there are kind of nuanced parts where she's clearly perturbed about him not opening up, but this is where, yeah, she full on addresses it. And as you say, they both go up a level in this kind of scene. And
yeah,
it's bigger. And it's one of those things where if you just put out like this kind of clip out of context, I know this kind of happened with Marriage Story. There's this scene where Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson's characters, who are going for a divorce in Marriage Story, have this massive emotional fight, and it got memed all over kind of film Twitter, and people were taking the piss out of it a lot. And it's like, within the context of the film, something that big and explosive makes sense when you've seen it building over all the kind of past scenes with these characters together. And it's in this, you've seen this building with Skylar and Will. You've seen him lying. You've seen kind of her being more and more like, I want to meet your friends. I want to meet your brothers that you're lying about. I want to, come spend time.
But also being
place.
really patient.
Yeah.
You see her patience. You see how she's accepting of him from the beginning, even if it's not necessarily about, him lying about his family or whatever. You see how she accepts him for his flaws, and they're the flaws, or some of the flaws that Sean talks about.
Well, yeah, that exactly goes back to that conversation. That's what love is kind of knowing someone's flaws and not caring and accepting them regardless.
And you see her do that from the get-go. I mean, when he doesn't call her back, or when he calls her from prison, that doesn't scare her away.
Yeah. Just the line of, are you pre-law by any chance? It's very funny.
And that doesn't scare her away. So he's all the way through, he's accepting these things, or he's experiencing these things that he doesn't recognize. Like he's seeing people trust him and open up to him, and he's seeing people accept him for his flaws. He's seeing people with ambition trying to move forward, and there seems to be this kind of neglect to accept it because he just finds everything so easy, or seemingly finds everything so easy, and I think that there's this pivotal moment where Sean just keeps repeating the line, "It's not your fault."
Hot.
And yeah, I mean, that scene was like the dam being broken for him.
Yeah.
But it's been building because he's kind of been experiencing, and obviously he's kind of been learning lessons as he's gone, and you've seen him sort of question himself, when you've had Sean put him in his place about things. He doesn't walk away completely unscathed by what Sean has to say to him, but it seems like there are these lessons that he ends up learning by the end. He doesn't realise that they're happening to him all the way through. And as somebody who does go to therapy, that is a very good representation of how therapy can work. And I think that, yeah, just the way that it's kind of, it builds and builds, and then obviously you have that scene where he just kind of breaks down.
Yeah, what I really love about the scene is how throughout the film, in these kind of therapy sessions, Sean hasn't been addressing kind of the root of Will's trauma. He's been addressing kind of the issues that it throws up, because he's someone who has been through the same thing, so he can understand on the same level. And it's not just about diving in and addressing, the fact that he was abused. It's just kind of helping him through these issues that it's created for him later in life, in terms of opening up to others and trusting others. And this is the first time where they really address it. And this is, Sean knows that this is the moment that, okay, we need to address this. And what does he need to hear? He needs to hear that it's not his fault. And that is quite a common, I believe, kind of thing, is people who are survivors of abuse like this from their childhood often do kind of think in their kind of own heads, it was my fault in some way. I did something to deserve this. And he has never been told this. He never had kind of that support network who was there to tell him it's not his fault, until Sean does at this moment.
Yeah, and what's so great about this scene is that you see that kind of facade that Will wears dissipate. When he kind of goes, I know it wasn't. And you just see this, like, these cogs turning in his head, and you see him just change. And I just can't, I feel like I struggle to watch this film objectively. This is something that you're very good at doing. I can't do that with this film and with some other films. This is one of my favourite films. I sit and watch a scene like this and I go, the acting is incredible, the writing is incredible, I love this scene so much, it makes me feel so emotional. And ultimately, that's what you want from a film, right?
Yeah, I mean, it hits me in those ways as well.
Yeah, of course. And but I mean, and you have a very good ability to kind of watch a film, and like, as I said the other week, you can understand that it can be a bad film but you enjoy it, or vice versa.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, I just get very overwhelmed by emotion in this film, and just sheer appreciation for it. But yeah, this scene is just so heartbreaking. And another thing that I like about this whole film is that, it has those moments, those impactful moments, like all those monologues and those brilliantly written speeches, and you just go, how does somebody come up with this? How did somebody write this so well? And then it has the nuances. I know I love that word, but it has those kind of details, the small things about each character and about each relationship. For me, one of my favourite things about Sean was that, when he was talking to Will, the way he always kind of rested his chin in his hand and his head in his hand, and it was just this very kind of youthful, almost childlike, kind sort of. It was giving. It was, it showed that he was relaxed and he was comfortable and he was open with him, and that for me was just one of the most impactful things about the character as a whole, was just those little characteristics that had been built around it and around Sean to kind of create this person. And I think there's those moments where, you have those bombshells, and then you've got those little nuances that you notice, and you're like, this is hitting me on so many levels.
Yeah, I love that you kind of point that out. And kind of, I mentioned earlier about Robin Williams and his genius at physical comedy, but he's just kind of a master of body language as well. You mentioned this, that almost certainly came from Robin Williams and his kind of, this is the kind of body language that would make this character as kind of as open and as you say, calming for Will as possible. And yeah, I think that's kind of part of the genius of Robin Williams.
Yeah, I have no doubt that came from Robin Williams. Absolutely.
One of the other big things I love in the film is kind of the way that there's almost a shift towards the end where it becomes, from the kind of first time that Sean and Lambo meet in the pub, or I guess they call it a bar in America, and there's this kind of shift towards shaping Will's future, and Lambo is very much pushing Will to go in a certain direction, and what Sean really cares about is, well, what does Will want? Like, it shouldn't be for us to decide where he needs to go. Will needs to decide what he wants. And it kind of all comes to a head where, eventually Will does take a job that Lambo sorts for him, and there's that kind of final therapy session, and he says, I've taken the job, and he's like, is that what you want? And he's like, yeah, I think it is. But you also get that kind of uncertainty, and it leads to that kind of final decision Will makes to go see about a girl and to chase Skylar to California, rather than take this steady job that will, see him through for life. And he doesn't want, based on everything he said in the film.
I think there's kind of two aspects to this moment where he decides to go and see Skylar. And there is the one which you've just spoken about, which is the fact that, it's about what he wants. He's made the decision, and it's so lovely that what he wanted and what he ends up wanting has come from Sean, and it's not necessarily what Lambo wanted for him anyway. But also I think there's this kind of idea that, he's actually sitting with the fact that he can get a job anywhere he wants in the world. Like, he would walk into any job anywhere. He knows that other opportunities are going to come up. Up until that point, you see him just neglecting it completely. He just dismisses it. He doesn't. It's like he has no real regard for his intelligence and for the opportunities that it presents. But I think that in making this decision and kind of actively considering both, there seems to be this kind of acceptance that he's okay with, he understands his level of intelligence.
Well, I think this comes from Chucky, and when Chucky is finally kind of goes, listen, I love you, but if you stay here doing nothing for 20 years, I will kill you. Because and it's the whole part which I love, again, brilliant bit of screenwriting, where he's like, no, it's not for you, it's for me. You have this ability to get out of here, and you wouldn't be doing me a disservice if you don't use that, because I'm stuck here and I can't see you just waste your life away with me. And just the line, and I remember when I first watched this film, and it was the bit that stuck with me, is where he says, the best 10 seconds of my day are when I knock on your door and there's a tiny bit of hope that you just won't answer. And then when you finally see it, and it happens at the end of the film, and look, I'm a bigger Ben Affleck fan than you are. I think Ben Affleck has put in more good performances than you maybe give him credit for. I don't think he's awful. There are certainly plenty of awful ones out there, but I think he's given a bunch of good ones as well.
Yeah, I think he's got a talent. He's good at what he does. He's very good in Team America.
The nuance in this scene, though, where it's just a moment of like kind of him being staggered by it, and then just the smile that breaks out on him as he kind of walks away, and it's not big, it's not over the top. As his whole performance has been this big over the top Bostonian guy, but in this moment he gets this kind of quiet moment of just genuine delight that he conveys so nicely. Yeah, I think this is exactly kind of what you're talking about. Is he's finally accepted this message that Chucky's got into him about, you can use your gifts, your incredible knowledge, and
I think he learns to appreciate what he's got.
Yeah,
and I love that there's kind of these conclusions that are dropped at the end of the film, and there's a few, like it's one after the other, but it doesn't feel repetitive, and it doesn't feel kind of overdone. Like it's each of them, you're like, oh my god, this is breaking my heart even more,
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, it's set up really well, and I think that because there's been such an emphasis on the relationships and the impact of everything kind of linking back to those relationships, that's why all of those sort of I's dotted and T's crossed feel so appropriate, and they're done brilliantly.
Yeah. I think, unless you have anything more to kind of add on the film, I think that's probably a good place to leave it and hit up the post-production.
Yeah, I mean, can you tell I love it?
Yes, you can tell you love this film.
What are your final thoughts on the film, Shug?
Well, let me run through some post-production and I'll get into them.
Okay.
So the film comes out. It performs incredibly well. On a $10 million budget, it made that back on its opening weekend, and it went on to gross, over 200 million worldwide. So it smashed its kind of earnings. It came out to strong reviews. A lot of them were saying that the story was predictable, but particularly in the performance, there's enough there to overcome that. I think the reputation of this film has grown even more since it came out.
Yeah.
It did really well at awards, except in Britain. At the Oscars, Damon Affleck won for screenplay and Robin Williams won for Best Supporting Actor. It was also nominated for Best Picture. Gus Van Sant was nominated for Best Director. Damon was nominated for Best Actor. Minnie Driver was nominated for Best Actress. It also was nominated for Editing, Score, and Original Song. It picked up awards at a bunch of other ceremonies, except it didn't get a single nomination at the BAFTAs. The last thing I want to mention is that the bench in Boston Public Garden, where Will and Sean sit, in the kind of the scene we've mentioned a number of times, one of those great monologues, and also a great bit of directing from Van Sant, with the kind of single shot on Williams that slowly brings Will into focus. It's great.
Yeah.
That became kind of a temporary shrine to Robin Williams after he passed away, and I think it's so fitting that something from this film did, as you say.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a scene where he talks about his own personal experiences, and something that people naturally will reflect on after death. So yeah, feels very fitting.
As for my final thoughts, I think this film is incredible. I love it. Maybe not quite as much as you. Not in my all-time kind of top 50 or whatever, but I think it is a great film. It is rightly lauded as a kind of masterpiece of the late 90s. Robin Williams this is for me his best performance, and I think he's given so many great performances.
I think for me too.
Yeah, I think it's just superb.
Great, me too. In case you couldn't tell.
Yeah. When you come in saying the film's one of your favourites, you're all, like, it was the same with me for Spirited Away last week. It's like there's not much more I can say than like it's one of my favourite films.
Yeah, exactly. Like I can't. So half the time I was just watching it, going, I can't really read into this because I just love it. Like, I love everything about it. Yeah, so I'm glad that I managed to get that out there for my final pick. It is your pick for next week. That means it's your final pick as well.
Yeah, the last pick of the season.
Yeah, before we do our kind of awards episode.
Yeah.
So what is your pick?
So we've said before, I've said before, I'm picking films based around some of my favourite characters. This is another newer film. It's, again, you called me out off camera after we did, I believe it was Serenity, and said, are you going to pick any female characters? Well, I did last week, and I will be again next week. This is actually an action film, and I think it's an action film that I will say might be the greatest action film ever made. I'll put it up there with Die Hard. I'll put it up there with Terminator 2. We're doing Mad Max Fury Road. We're talking Furiosa, one of the great characters in film history, one of the great characters of the 2010s. Let's go.
Great. Okay, so this is a film that I think, tried to watch maybe once or twice, and every time it comes up, I always say, "Oh, I wasn't sure about it,"
Okay.
but it's because I've tried to. The last time I tried to watch it, I was at our friend Michael's uni house,
Oh,
and I'd been out. I think I'd been out the night before. I was not in a good way,
yeah.
so maybe it's time I try and watch it again.
Okay, I'm glad I'm going to finally make you watch this film. And shout-outs to
Yeah.
Mikey, we love you. You're not listening to this, I know.
Yeah, but we'll definitely get him on this for the next season, maybe.
We'll
or
try.
at some point in the future.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Cool. I'm looking forward to it, and I think now that we've had all our picks out there, I think we've had some really strong picks this season.
Yeah, I've loved the variety we've had this season.
Yeah. I have watched films that I wouldn't ordinarily have watched, and I've enjoyed them. There's not been a film that I don't like.
Same.
And I think that goes for season 1 as well. So I think we're yet to see a film. I'm yet to see a film that I haven't enjoyed. So
I think we've only
Yeah.
had one miss for me, and that was The Grinch. And that's just a Jim
okay.
Carrey thing for me.
yeah, okay.
Well, that's just personal
So-
preference.
I feel like Christmas is, a time for forgiveness.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to next Christmas and see if you can pick another film I dislike around Christmas, which is highly possible.
I've actually got another one in mind.
Okay,
so,
great. I'm sure I hate it. I don't like Christmas films, if you couldn't tell. I think most of them are bad.
I'm not sure it would be one that you're expecting.
Listen, I've got 2 Christmas films left, okay?
That's it. We've only got 2 years in us.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to quick closer about what is going to be taking over my life for the next month, and with a little. So before we get to that, I want to shout out. This will tell you exactly when we're recording. Loki starts tomorrow on Disney Plus. Of kind of all the MCU shows, this is the one I'm most excited for because this
I'm
one
looking forward
looks
to this.
insane. It just looks crazy.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. It actually got some of it got filmed just outside my work,
Oh, nice.
and I was upset that I couldn't watch it being filmed. But I'm looking forward to this. I'd like to watch it as well. So I think I've got quite a few Marvel series to catch up on. I'm just making my way through some other stuff right now, but definitely want to watch.
But very soon after that, starting on Friday, my life is going to be consumed by the Euros.
The Euros, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is for the first time in my memory that Scotland have made a major football tournament.
Oh yeah, of course.
So the last one we made was the World Cup in 1998. I was 3 at the time and don't remember it. So yeah, I am so excited to see us crash and burn out, in the group stages and not make it through again.
No, you gotta have some faith. Have some faith.
Listen, I'm a Scotland fan. Obviously, my mood oscillates between we're losing all 3 games and we're gonna win it. Like, completely unrealistic expectations if I'm going to be positive.
Well, I mean, I actually saw somebody online raging because they were still referring to the competition as UEFA Euro 2020.
No, it's Euro 2020.
Yeah, but the fact that it's being played in 2021. Obviously, this is this was meant to happen last year. It's weird that it's happening so close to the Qatar World Cup.
Normally it's a 2-year gap. It'll only be a 1-year gap.
Yeah.
Maybe less because of whenever the World Cup's going to take place. It's going to be weird. Year and a half.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, something like that. So it looks like there's not going to be much of a break for these players. And they, it's been a weird season. They've come off the back of a really odd season. Everybody has been in the stadiums with no fans for the most part. So, I think I think it'll be a really interesting one. I think there's quite a few aspects to this which are going to be really cool and really just generally quite intriguing. I think, obviously having a global event like a pandemic has, I feel, kind of highlighted that we are, to some extent, highlighted that, you know, we're, not to quote High School Musical, all in this together. But, you know, I think it's built a sense of camaraderie across the sport. And I think another interesting thing that is, that we'll have to watch out for is the whole kind of taking the knee thing. I know that recently there was a bit of a negative response to the England team taking the knee prior to the game for the Black Lives Matter
I'll
movement.
be honest, I think there has been at every game there's held in England, there's always some racist about.
Which is very disappointing. But it will be interesting to see how that's kind of how that plays out through the tournament. I'm looking forward to it. My team is in it too, Wales.
Wales, absolutely. Can they pull a Greece? Can you get both your nations having unexpectedly won the Euros?
That would be the dream.
Listen, I'll give you losing in the final to Scotland.
All right. Yeah, we'll see.
We might not be able to talk to each other if our team's made the final. We might have to. Thank God we're going to be on hiatus, because if that happened, we'd have a couple of weeks where we wouldn't be able to talk to the loser. Wouldn't be able to talk to the winner.
Yeah. So you've got Czech Republic,
Croatia, and England. Yeah.
Yeah. Wales have got the hard group. Yeah. Wales have got Switzerland, Turkey, and Italy, I believe.
You can make it out of that.
So,
definitely doable.
Yeah, I think
you could top that group.
Italy might. Do you think?
Italy, I have no idea what to make of them right now. And Switzerland, they're always a solid team, but they don't score a lot of goals. And you say Hungary was the other one.
Turkey.
Again, a couple of talented players in there could cause problems. I think every game is up for grabs, to be honest. I think it's just a hard group. It's like there's no... Italy obviously are meant to be the standout team there, but they're just a bit in rebuilding at the moment.
Yeah.
So they're hard to call what they'll be like. So I think every game will be close, and it's definitely the kind of game where you could win everyone.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see what happens. And I do really enjoy kind of these big international competitions. I'm not a huge fan of international football. When there are international breaks during the season, I don't enjoy it because I really enjoy following club football. But when it comes to the Euros and when it comes to the World Cup, I am fully immersed. And I'm very excited. Yeah,
as I say, this will be taking over my life for the next month. I went to the last Euros, 2016, over in France. I went to see, I think, a quarter-final between Ireland and France. It was great. We were staying actually in Lyon, a little hotel above a Scottish bar.
Oh, amazing.
Which was awesome. And it was just like in this little plaza where there was a bunch of bars and so many just fans from all sort of different teams would kind of gather there, watch the games. Yeah, my dad started running around the plaza screaming his head off when Iceland knocked England out. It was like just great memories, and it was just great to have. Yeah, exactly. It was great to have kind of people from all over the continent coming together, watching football. It was just this great kind of camaraderie, feeling of togetherness, as you were saying. I love these big international tournaments, and I'm so excited. I've got my sticker book.
Me too.
I've been doing it all.
Oh gosh, those are the days. I've walked past them a couple of times in the shops, and I have been tempted. Don't, because I will buy one if you do. And I mean, I'm interested to hear what you think about how England's going to get on, because they've obviously been hit by a couple of injuries.
Well, your best player's out, Trent, and your second best player's not really fit, Henderson. The only two I care about. Those are Liverpool ones. Yeah. No, honestly, I'm more focused on Scotland in that group, and I hope we beat you. Well, we beat England. Not
yeah, I am Wales all the way.
No, yeah, I take that back. I didn't mean you. Normally, when people ask me about England, I'm used to conversing with England fans.
Yeah.
I hope Scotland beat them. Like, honestly, I'll take Scotland beat England and lose the other two games. I'll take that.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Great.
Yeah. That's going to be it for this week. You can find us on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, YouTube, anywhere you get your podcasts. If we're not somewhere and you want us to be, please do let us know. You can follow us at Nostalgia Bubble on Twitter and at Nostalgia Bubble Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. You can follow me at Shuggy Says everywhere on the internet.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Nyrees, which is NYEREES, and on Instagram at ReeseNye.
And we'll see you next time for Mad Max. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.